In the pursuit of wisdom, we must first understand that emotions, like the wind, are uncontrollable forces that can either strengthen us or topple us. The wise man knows this, and in his understanding he finds his power. To be emotionally untouchable is not to suppress what is human, but to rise above the turbulence of the world, to remain unmoved by the fleeting passions that govern the untrained mind. It is through the teachings of Stoicism that we can build this inner fortress, a place where our peace is inviolable, where our serenity is steadfast, and where the chaos of the world no longer dictates the course of our lives. The Stoic does not deny emotions, he simply masters them, turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Today we will learn how to cultivate this strength, to be unwavering and unshaken, regardless of what the world throws our way. 1. The nature of emotions, understanding their impact. Emotions, like the weather, are transient and often unpredictable, yet they hold great power over those who fail to recognize their true nature. To be emotionally untouchable, one must first understand the fundamental truth about emotions. They are not the essence of who we. 137. Nor are they reflections of our true character. Emotions are responses to external events, fleeting impressions that arise when we encounter something that either pleases or displeases us. The wise man, however, does not allow these responses to dictate his actions or thoughts. He recognizes that emotions, by their very nature, are outside of his control and, as such, cannot be trusted to determine the course of his life. We are not born as masters of our emotions. From an early age, we are taught to respond to the world with passion and intensity. We are told to celebrate our triumphs and lament our losses, to feel deeply and act impulsively. Yet, as we grow older and gain wisdom, we must learn to see beyond these automatic responses and realize that our true strength lies not in our ability to react to the world, but in our ability to remain steadfast in the face of it. The Stoic does not seek to eliminate emotions, for that is neither possible nor desirable, but rather he seeks to transform his relationship with them. He understands that emotions arise, but he does not let them control him. Instead, he responds with reason and composure, using his intellect to guide his actions rather than allowing his emotions to dictate them. The first step toward becoming emotionally untouchable is recognizing the source of your emotions. Emotions are not inherent in the events themselves, but are born from our judgments about those events. A man does not become angry simply because he is insulted. He becomes angry because he judges the insult to be an attack on his dignity or worth. Likewise, a man does not experience sorrow because of a loss, but because he believes that the loss is something that should not have occurred, that it is an injustice, or that it diminishes his happiness. These judgments, which we make automatically, are the true source of our emotional turmoil. Once you recognize that your emotions are born from your judgments, you are given the power to change them. You can choose at any moment to alter the way you perceive a situation, and in doing so you can alter your emotional response to it. This is where the power of Stoic philosophy lies, in its ability to teach us to judge events, not by their superficial appearance, but by their alignment with nature and virtue. When you judge an event through the lens of wisdom, you see it for what it truly is, neither good nor bad, but simply an occurrence that is beyond your control. If you are insulted, the insult is neither a reflection of your true self nor a blow to your dignity. It is merely a word spoken by another person, and it holds no power over you unless you allow it to. The Stoic leader understands that emotions, when left unchecked, can cloud judgment and lead to irrational actions. When we react impulsively to our emotions, we often act in ways that are contrary to our nature, guided not by reason, but by passion. This is why the Stoics emphasize the importance of self-reflection and mindfulness. To be emotionally untouchable is not to suppress your feelings, but to observe them without attachment, to recognize them as fleeting and transient, and to choose not to be swept away by their currents. The wise man does not let his emotions define him, nor does he allow them to control his actions. Instead, he remains calm and composed, guided by the light of reason and the clarity of a mind that has been trained to see beyond the surface of things. To achieve this mastery over our emotions, we must cultivate a deep awareness of our thoughts and feelings. This requires a commitment to daily self-examination, a constant questioning of the judgments we make and the assumptions we hold. When an emotion arises, the Stoic does not act immediately. Instead, he takes a moment to pause, to reflect on the nature of the emotion, and to ask himself why he is feeling this way. Is this emotion based on a judgment that aligns with virtue, or is it a reaction to something outside of his control? Is it something that can serve his higher purpose, or is it an obstacle to his inner peace? In this moment of reflection, he separates the emotion from the event, recognizing that the emotion is not the event itself, but his own response to it. In this process of self-reflection, the Stoic also understands the importance of accepting what cannot be changed. The events of the world are beyond our control, and thus it is not the events themselves that cause us distress, but our resistance to them. When we resist what is beyond our control, we create suffering for ourselves. But when we accept the impermanence and unpredictability of life, we free ourselves from this suffering. The Stoic does not lament the inevitable, nor does he strive to change the unchangeable. He accepts the world as it is, with all its uncertainties, and in doing so he finds peace. In mastering the nature of emotions, the Stoic becomes emotionally untouchable, not because he is indifferent or cold, but because he is anchored in the knowledge that his peace is not dependent on the world around him. He recognizes that his emotions are temporary, that they arise and fade like the waves on the shore, and that they do not define him. He is not at the mercy of his passions, but instead he has the power to control his reactions. And in this control, he finds his freedom. 2. The power of perception, reframing your reality. To master your emotions, you must first master your perception. What you see, how you interpret the world, is the foundation of all your emotional responses. The Stoic understands that nothing in itself is inherently good or bad. It is the judgments we place upon events that determine our emotional reactions. The power of perception is the key to becoming emotionally untouchable, for it is through our perception that we shape the world around us. To be emotionally unshaken is not to withdraw from life, nor to ignore its challenges, but to see the world with clarity, to perceive it as it truly is, and to respond with wisdom and equanimity. Consider that every event, every experience, every interaction is a neutral occurrence. It is only through our minds, through our interpretation of these events, that they gain meaning. A man may experience a loss, and one person might perceive it as a tragedy, while another sees it as an opportunity for growth. A person might face criticism, and one might take offense, while another sees it as a chance to improve. The event itself does not change, but the way we perceive it determines the emotional reaction we have to it. The Stoic leader understands this truth deeply, that it is not the event that disturbs him, but the way he judges it. He does not allow himself to be swept away by first impressions, by automatic responses, or by external circumstances. Instead, he chooses to view the world with a mind trained in reason and virtue. The first step in harnessing the power of perception is to recognize that your emotions are a product of your mind's judgments. When you feel anger, sadness, frustration, or fear, ask yourself, what judgment have I made about this situation that has led to this emotion? Have I labeled something as unfair or wrong, when in reality it is simply something that happened outside my control? Have I attached meaning to an event that in truth carries no inherent value beyond its occurrence? The Stoic does not act on his emotions impulsively, nor does he believe that he must always express them. Instead, he first examines them, digs deep into the underlying judgments that gave rise to them, and seeks to challenge and reframe those judgments. The power of perception also means seeing things as they truly are, rather than through the distorted lens of ego or desire. When we look at the world through the lens of desire, we often perceive things as either something we must have or something we must avoid. We see opportunities as things that will bring us happiness and avoidances as things that will bring us pain. This way of seeing the world leaves us at the mercy of external circumstances. A Stoic, however, perceives life through a lens of nature and virtue. He sees that everything, both pleasure and pain, success and failure, are transient and beyond his control. He does not allow the temporary conditions of life to alter his peace, for he understands that his inner world is far more important than the ever-changing outer world. This shift in perception can be cultivated through the practice of reframing. Reframing is the process of taking an event and changing the way you look at it. For example, when facing a setback, instead of seeing it as a failure, see it as a lesson. When encountering an obstacle, rather than viewing it as a source of frustration, perceive it as an opportunity to grow stronger, to develop resilience, and to refine your character. The Stoic does not shy away from hardship, rather he embraces it as the forge in which his virtues are tempered. The adversities of life are not things to be avoided, but opportunities to demonstrate courage, patience, and wisdom. It is through reframing that the Stoic learns to embrace discomfort, to accept what is beyond his control, and to recognize the inherent value of every experience. When we see obstacles as opportunities, we transform our perception of them, and in doing so, we change our emotional response to them. We no longer experience anxiety in the face of challenges, but excitement and determination. We no longer fear the unknown, but welcome it as a chance to practice our Stoic virtues. Through reframing, we take control of our perception and, by extension, our emotions. Another aspect of perception is the importance of focusing on the present moment. So often our emotional responses are shaped by thoughts of the past or worries about the future. We regret past mistakes or lament opportunities missed, or we fear potential challenges that lie ahead. But the wise man knows that the only time that is real is the present. The Stoic leader does not dwell on past wrongs or future uncertainties, for he understands that these thoughts are distractions from the truth. What matters is what is in front of us now, how we respond to the present moment with wisdom and clarity. When we focus our attention on the present, we remove the emotional charge that comes from dwelling in the past or projecting into the future. This practice of mindfulness helps the Stoic to remain grounded, to stay centered, and to remain emotionally untouchable. The events of the past cannot be changed, and the future is uncertain, but the present moment is ours to shape. In the present, we can choose how we perceive what is happening around us, and in this choice we find our power. The practice of perception also involves detaching ourselves from the opinions and judgments of others. So often we allow our emotional state to be governed by what others think of us. If others praise us, we feel elated. If they criticize us, we feel deflated. The Stoic, however, understands that the opinions of others are beyond his control and have no bearing on his true worth. He does not allow the judgments of others to shape his perception of himself, for he knows that his value is determined not by external praise or blame, but by his own adherence to virtue. When we let go of the need for validation from others, we free ourselves from the emotional roller coaster of approval and disapproval, and we become truly untouchable. The power of perception also calls for gratitude. The Stoic understands that the world is filled with both challenges and blessings, and that both are part of the great cosmic order. Rather than focusing on what he lacks, the Stoic focuses on what he has, on the abundance that is present in his life, even in times of difficulty. Gratitude allows us to reframe our experiences, to see them through a lens of appreciation rather than lack. When we shift our perception from what is missing to what is present, we find contentment and peace, no matter the circumstances. In mastering perception, we master our emotional state. We become untouchable, not by avoiding life, but by seeing it with clear eyes. We understand that our emotional responses are not determined by the events themselves, but by the way we choose to perceive them. And in this choice, we find the power to shape our reality, to remain grounded, and to live a life of serenity, no matter what the world may bring. 3. The dichotomy of control. focusing only on what you can change. In the pursuit of emotional invulnerability, there is no greater principle to grasp than the dichotomy of control. This fundamental Stoic idea reveals the secret to emotional freedom and peace of mind. We must focus our energy and attention solely on what we can control and relinquish any concern for what lies beyond our reach. To truly become emotionally untouchable, we must cultivate a profound understanding of this dichotomy, for in this understanding lies the key to mastering our reactions, our judgments, and ultimately our inner tranquility. The dichotomy of control divides everything in life into two categories: things that are within our control and things that are beyond our control. What we can control are our own thoughts, judgments, intentions, and actions. These are the only things that we possess absolute authority over. On the other hand, everything else, the actions of others, the events of the world, the conditions of nature, and even our own bodies lie beyond our influence. These things happen as they do, regardless of our will, and we must accept that we are powerless to change them. When we focus on what is within our control, we regain our power. Our emotional state is governed not by external circumstances, but by our response to them. The Stoic does not waste energy trying to control things that are outside his grasp. He does not strive to change the behavior of others, to dictate the course of events, or to prevent the inevitable passage of time. Instead, he accepts that the world will unfold as it will, and he focuses on how he responds to it. His peace is not dependent on the whims of fortune, nor does he allow external events to dictate his mood. He knows that it is not the event itself that disturbs him, but the way he perceives it and reacts to it. In recognizing the dichotomy of control, we become free from the tyranny of external forces. When we fixate on what we cannot change, we subject ourselves to frustration, anxiety, and despair. We try to control the uncontrollable, and in doing so, we create suffering for ourselves. We attempt to manipulate the world around us, but the more we try to grasp hold of things that are beyond our reach, the more we find ourselves helpless and disillusioned. The Stoic, however, understands that true power lies in releasing this futile struggle and instead focusing his attention on what he can control: his own mind, his own actions, and his own responses. The first step in embracing the dichotomy of control is to practice acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation or passivity. It means acknowledging the reality of a situation as it is, without judgment or resistance. The Stoic accepts that things will unfold according to the natural course of events, and he accepts his own limitations in the face of those events. When we accept what is beyond our control, we free ourselves from the emotional turmoil that comes with resistance. We no longer fight against the flow of life, but instead we learn to move with it, adjusting our actions and responses in alignment with nature. For example, consider a situation in which you are faced with a difficult challenge. The Stoic does not waste time lamenting that the challenge exists, nor does he complain about the circumstances that led to it. He understands that the challenge is outside his control, but his response to it is entirely within his power. Instead of becoming frustrated, angry, or despondent, he shifts his focus to what he can do in the moment. He evaluates the situation, considers his options, and makes the best decision based on his principles and virtues. He remains calm, composed, and rational because he knows that his peace is not dependent on the outcome, but on the quality of his response. The dichotomy of control also teaches us to detach from the opinions of others. We often find ourselves emotionally affected by what others think of us, whether they approve or disapprove of our actions. The Stoic, however, understands that the judgments of others are beyond his control, and he does not allow them to dictate his emotional state. He does not seek validation from others, nor does he fear criticism or rejection. His worth is not determined by external approval, but by his adherence to virtue and his commitment to living according to nature. When we free ourselves from the need for external validation, we become emotionally untouchable, for we are no longer dependent on the changing opinions of others to maintain our sense of self-worth. Moreover, the dichotomy of control invites us to embrace the unpredictable nature of life. It is natural to want stability and certainty, but the Stoic understands that these things are illusions. Life is inherently uncertain, and external events often unfold in ways we cannot predict or control. This truth is liberating, for it allows us to relinquish the need for certainty and to embrace the flow of life with grace and composure. When we stop trying to control the future or anticipate every possible outcome, we release the anxiety and fear that come with uncertainty. We learn to trust in the unfolding of events, knowing that our response is the only thing we can truly control. The practice of focusing only on what is within our control also extends to our relationships with others. The Stoic does not try to change other people or impose his will upon them. He understands that each person is the master of their own mind, and their actions are shaped by their own perceptions, beliefs, and desires. While we can influence others through our actions and words, we cannot force them to think or act in a certain way. The Stoic does not become upset when others act in ways he does not approve of, because he knows that their behavior is beyond his control. Instead, he focuses on how he can respond to them with virtue, patience, and wisdom. He understands that his own peace does not depend on the behavior of others, but on his own reactions and actions. To practice the dichotomy of control, we must also cultivate the habit of reflection. When we encounter a situation that triggers a strong emotional reaction, we must pause and ask ourselves, is this something that is within my control? If it is, then I will take the necessary actions to address it. If it is not, then I will accept it and move forward without allowing it to disturb my peace. Through this process of reflection, we learn to distinguish between what we can and cannot change, and we focus our energy on what truly matters: our own thoughts, actions, and responses. By embracing the dichotomy of control, we become emotionally untouchable, not because we seek to avoid life's challenges, but because we learn to meet them with wisdom and equanimity. We focus on what we can control and accept what we cannot, and in doing so we find true freedom. The world may be chaotic and unpredictable, but our peace remains unshaken, because it is not dependent on the world around us. It is rooted in our own mind, in our ability to choose how we respond to the events of life. And this, ultimately, is the foundation of emotional resilience and serenity. 4. The practice of negative visualization. Preparing for the inevitable. One of the most powerful tools in the Stoics' arsenal for achieving emotional untouchability is the practice of negative visualization. While it may seem counterintuitive, envisioning the worst-case scenarios, the losses, and the challenges we fear can be a source of profound strength and resilience. The Stoic does not live in fear of what might happen. Instead, he anticipates the inevitable difficulties of life with clarity and calm, preparing himself mentally and emotionally for whatever may come. By embracing the possibility of loss, hardship, and adversity, he learns to navigate the world with greater composure and equanimity. Negative visualization is the practice of consciously imagining the worst possible outcomes of a situation. This could be the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the failure of a project, or the deterioration of health. The purpose of this practice is not to dwell in pessimism or despair, but to prepare the mind to accept the reality of life's impermanence and unpredictability. The Stoic understands that nothing in life is permanent, and that every possession, every relationship, and every circumstance is subject to change. Rather than being blindsided by these changes, the Stoic practices negative visualization to desensitize himself to the fear of loss and to develop a sense of gratitude for what he currently has. This practice begins with taking time each day to reflect on the possibility of losing something you value. Perhaps you have a loved one whom you cherish deeply. Imagine, for a moment, that they are no longer with you. Consider how you would feel, how your life would change, and what would remain important. The aim is not to induce suffering, but to gain a clearer perspective on what is truly valuable. By confronting the reality of loss, you come to appreciate the present moment more deeply. You begin to understand that the things you take for granted today are not guaranteed, and that it is wise to cherish them while they are still with you. The Stoic also practices negative visualization by reflecting on the impermanence of life itself. The life we have is temporary, and our time in this world is limited. By contemplating our own mortality, we begin to see life through a lens of urgency and clarity. When we accept that our time here is finite, we become more mindful of how we spend it. We learn to focus on what truly matters, on the relationships that nourish us, on the work that fulfills us, and on the virtues we cultivate. Negative visualization helps us to embrace the present moment, knowing that it is all we have and that nothing is guaranteed. This practice also prepares us for the inevitable setbacks and hardships that life will bring. The Stoic does not expect to live a life free from challenges, nor does he wish to avoid them. Instead, he anticipates them with equanimity, understanding that they are a natural part of the human experience. When you visualize the difficulties you fear, you take away their power to surprise or overwhelm you. You come to accept that hardship is an inevitable part of life, and in doing so you free yourself from the anxiety that comes with anticipating the unknown. When faced with adversity, you are not caught off guard, you are prepared to meet it with strength, clarity, and a sense of purpose. Negative visualization is not about dwelling on what might go wrong, but about cultivating a mindset of acceptance and resilience. By visualizing loss and suffering, you train your mind to accept them as part of the natural course of life. This acceptance is not passive resignation, but active preparation. You learn that while you cannot control what happens to you, you can control your response to it. The Stoic response is always rooted in virtue, courage in the face of fear, patience in the face of pain, and wisdom in the face of uncertainty. Through this practice, you also cultivate gratitude. When you imagine the loss of something you value, you are reminded of how much you have to be thankful for in the present. Instead of focusing on what you lack or what might go wrong, you begin to appreciate the present for what it is: perfect in its imperfection, fleeting and precious. Gratitude arises naturally when we confront the possibility of loss, for we begin to recognize the fragility of life and the importance of what we have right now. This practice is also deeply connected to the Stoic understanding of the nature of suffering. The Stoics teach that suffering is not an inherent evil, but a natural part of life that can be used as a means of growth and self-improvement. When we visualize negative outcomes, we prepare ourselves not just to endure them, but to learn from them. We train ourselves to see hardship as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience, patience, and inner strength. The Stoic is not defeated by suffering, he is shaped by it, refined by it, and made stronger through it. In practicing negative visualization, we develop the ability to live without attachment. Attachment to people, possessions, and circumstances is the root cause of much of our emotional turmoil. When we cling too tightly to something, we fear its loss, and this fear creates anxiety and stress. By regularly practicing negative visualization, we learn to let go of our attachments and to appreciate things without clinging to them. We understand that everything in life is temporary, and that true peace comes from accepting this impermanence without fear or resentment. The Stoic does not cling to the present moment but enjoys it fully, knowing that it will pass. He does not fear loss because he knows that all things are transient and that he has the power to adapt to whatever comes his way. The practice of negative visualization is not meant to make us anxious or pessimistic. Rather, it is a tool for cultivating emotional resilience, gratitude, and acceptance. By visualizing the worst-case scenario, we remove its power over us. We realize that even in the face of hardship, we have the inner strength to endure, to adapt, and to grow. We recognize that we are not defined by our circumstances, but by our responses to them. The Stoic does not seek to avoid suffering, but to meet it with wisdom and grace. By preparing for the inevitable with a calm and composed mind, he becomes truly emotionally untouchable, grounded in the knowledge that no matter what happens, he is ready. 5. The importance of virtue. Living a life aligned with inner values in the pursuit of emotional invulnerability nothing is more essential than the cultivation of virtue. The Stoics teach that virtue is the highest good and the only true source of happiness and fulfillment. To become emotionally untouchable, we must align our thoughts, words, and actions with the timeless principles of virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These virtues, when practiced consistently, act as a shield against the turbulence of life. They allow us to remain steadfast in the face of external challenges, undisturbed by the fleeting emotions that others and the world may impose upon us. The Stoic understands that true happiness does not lie in external circumstances, but in the cultivation of a virtuous character. Our possessions, our status, our relationships, and even our health are subject to change, and none of them can be relied upon to provide lasting peace. Yet, virtue is something that resides within us, something that we can cultivate regardless of the external conditions of our lives. By focusing on living a life of virtue, we free ourselves from the emotional upheavals caused by the unpredictable nature of the world. The four cardinal virtues of Stoicism, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, serve as the foundation for emotional resilience. Each of these virtues provides a guide for how to respond to the challenges of life with clarity and composure, without being swayed by the whims of external events. To practice virtue is to practice mastery over the self, to act in accordance with our highest values rather than being driven by fleeting impulses or emotional reactions. Wisdom is the virtue that enables us to see the world clearly, to understand what is within our control and what is beyond it, and to make decisions based on reason rather than emotion. The wise person does not react impulsively to situations but takes the time to reflect, to consider all angles, and to choose the most virtuous course of action. Wisdom gives us the clarity to make decisions that align with our values rather than being swayed by the noise of the world. When we act with wisdom, we are guided by the principles of reason, not by the temporary passions of the moment. Courage is the virtue that allows us to face adversity without fear. It is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act rightly despite fear or discomfort. The Stoic understands that life will bring inevitable challenges, and it is through courage that we face them with strength and integrity. Whether it is the courage to stand up for what is just, to confront our own weaknesses, or to endure hardship with dignity, courage allows us to remain resolute, no matter what external events may arise. Courage is what enables us to act with virtue even when the world around us seems uncertain or hostile. Justice is the virtue that compels us to act with fairness, respect, and integrity in our dealings with others. It is the commitment to treating others with dignity, to upholding the common good, and to acting in ways that contribute to the well-being of society as a whole. The Stoic does not allow external insults, slights, or injustices to provoke anger or resentment. Instead, he practices justice by responding with fairness, seeking harmony and understanding in his relationships, and striving to create a positive impact in the world. Justice allows us to maintain emotional peace even in the face of external wrongs, for we know that our responsibility is to act justly, regardless of how others behave. Temperance is the virtue that teaches us to exercise self-control and moderation in all things. It is the ability to maintain balance, to resist the allure of excess, and to avoid being governed by our desires. Temperance enables us to maintain emotional stability in the face of temptation, whether it is the temptation of wealth, pleasure, or power. The Stoic understands that indulgence in excess leads to dissatisfaction and unrest, while moderation leads to peace and contentment. Temperance allows us to remain unaffected by external temptations, for we know that true fulfillment does not lie in external gratification, but in the cultivation of inner harmony. When we cultivate virtue, we transform our inner lives. We no longer rely on external sources for our happiness or emotional well-being, for we have found the only true source of peace living in accordance with our highest principles. The Stoic leader recognizes that he is not at the mercy of external circumstances or the opinions of others. His emotional state is not dependent on his wealth, his success, or his relationships, but on his commitment to living a virtuous life. Virtue becomes the foundation of his inner strength, for when we act with integrity, we align ourselves with nature's laws, and we are at peace with ourselves and the world. This practice of living virtuously also provides us with a source of stability in the midst of life's uncertainties. The world is unpredictable, and we cannot control the external events that come our way. However, we can control how we respond, and when we respond with virtue, we are emotionally untouchable. We no longer allow the chaos of the world to dictate our emotional state. Instead, we meet the world with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, and in doing so, we become the masters of our own emotions. The Stoic also understands that virtue is not something that is acquired overnight. It is a lifelong practice, a continual process of striving to align our thoughts, actions, and intentions with the highest ideals. Each day is an opportunity to refine our character, to practice virtue in the face of adversity, and to deepen our commitment to living according to nature. The path to emotional invulnerability is not easy, but it is through the consistent practice of virtue that we gain the strength and resilience to remain unaffected by the storms of life. Moreover, virtue is not a solitary pursuit. The Stoic understands that his actions have an impact on others, and that the practice of virtue is essential not only for his own well-being, but for the greater good. By acting with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, we contribute to the moral fabric of society. We become a beacon of virtue, guiding others by our example and showing them the power of living in accordance with nature. In this way, the Stoic leader's emotional resilience is not only for his own benefit, but for the benefit of all those around him. The importance of virtue cannot be overstated in the Stoic philosophy. It is the cornerstone of emotional stability and invulnerability. When we live virtuously, we are free from the volatility of external circumstances. We no longer depend on the approval of others, the acquisition of wealth, or the avoidance of pain to sustain our happiness. Instead, we draw our strength from within, from our commitment to living in harmony with our highest values. In this way, the practice of virtue becomes the foundation of emotional peace, for when we act in accordance with our true nature, we become untouchable, impervious to the storms of the world. 6. Embracing adversity, using challenges as opportunities for growth. In the pursuit of emotional untouchability, one must come to understand a fundamental truth. Adversity is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. Life is replete with challenges, difficulties, and obstacles, and yet it is through these very trials that we grow, evolve, and become stronger. The Stoic does not see adversity as a curse or a punishment, but as an opportunity for self-improvement and inner strength. By changing our perspective on hardship and viewing it as an inevitable part of the human experience, we free ourselves from the fear and resistance that often accompany difficult situations. The Stoic teaches us that it is not the nature of adversity itself that harms us, but the way we respond to it. Adversity is a natural part of life, an inescapable force that shapes us, molds us, and, if we allow it, makes us better versions of ourselves. The Stoic does not seek to avoid hardship, but to meet it with courage, wisdom, and resilience. Each difficulty that we face is a test, an opportunity to demonstrate our strength of character, to deepen our understanding of the world, and to build the virtues that will guide us throughout our lives. The first step in embracing adversity is to reframe our mindset. Rather than seeing challenges as obstacles, we must learn to see them as opportunities for growth. The Stoic knows that hardship is not something to lament or resist, but something to be accepted as a natural part of the human condition. The trials we face are the very things that allow us to develop virtue. They give us the chance to practice courage when we are afraid, to demonstrate wisdom when we are uncertain, to show patience when we are tested, and to act justly when we are wronged. It is only in adversity that we can fully appreciate the power of virtue and how it can guide us through the darkest and guide us. Take, for example, a difficult situation where things do not go according to plan. The Stoic does not allow himself to become angry, frustrated, or despondent. Instead, he recognizes that this is an opportunity to practice his virtues. If he faces failure, he knows that it is not the failure itself that matters, but how he responds to it. Will he let failure defeat him, or will he rise from it, learning from the experience and improving himself in the process? If he faces criticism, he does not become defensive or bitter. Instead, he sees it as a chance to practice humility and to examine whether there is truth in the critique. Every challenge presents an opportunity to choose how we will respond, and in making virtuous choices, we become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Adversity also teaches us the value of resilience. The Stoic understands that life is filled with moments of hardship and that we cannot avoid suffering. However, what we can do is learn how to endure it with grace and dignity. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the ability to persist in the face of it. The Stoic develops resilience by accepting the reality of suffering and by recognizing that it is not something that can destroy him. He learns to endure hardship not as a victim, but as a conscious agent, choosing to remain steadfast in his commitment to virtue and self-mastery. This resilience is what makes the Stoic emotionally untouchable, for he is not shaken by the storms of life, he weathers them with poise and strength. Furthermore, the Stoic recognizes that adversity is often a teacher. It is through challenges that we learn the most about ourselves and the world around us. When everything is going smoothly, there is little opportunity for growth. It is in moments of struggle that we are forced to confront our limitations, our weaknesses, and our fears. By facing adversity head-on, we learn to overcome these obstacles and to transcend our limitations. This process of self-discovery is essential to the Stoic's path, for it is only by facing our flaws and weaknesses that we can grow into the best versions of ourselves.